sustained, consistent production. You know, you mentioned Clemson. I would throw Ohio State in there. I would throw Wisconsin in there. As good as Iowa looks on defense, they're horrible on offense. You know, Texas is a nightmare in the offensive line. There's nobody out there, and I think Alabama's close. Alabama's had to play. You know, their schedule's been a bit different than other people's. But as far as clean, consistent, you know, series in, series out, quarter in, quarter out, week to week, I think it's more than fair to say that about Ole Miss. I think it's more than fair whether it's sustainable, but I think to this point it's more than fair to say that about Michigan. Michigan looks like they may have solved their quarterback problem. And they got a running back that scored 7 touchdowns in 3 games, and they've hit all kinds of explosive plays in the passing game, which is what they've been talking about for 3 years, and nobody's seen it. So there are a handful of teams out there, not many of them, that are playing pretty decent football right now, but for the most part, and don't you think, Bo, we've kind of become conditioned over the last few years to, you know, always think that it's going to be easy for Ohio State. It's going to be easy for Clemson. It's going to be easy for Alabama.
Sure.
It's going to be easy for Georgia. The reality is when you start having some significant changeover within your roster, particularly at quarterback or in the trenches on either side of the ball, you're going to have some retooling to do.
Their level of execution, Ole Miss's level of execution on the offensive side of the football is off the charts. I know it's different than 2 years ago with LSU, okay? And even last year, because I don't think Bama has Judy, Calvin Ridley type guys right now, Luginbill. I mean, their group collectively does not scare you like they have the last several years. They may by November 1, but right now.
Right.
Talk about Ole Miss's level of execution, both running the football and throwing it, and how dangerous they are with explosive plays.
Well, I think when you talk about execution, the thing that stands out that makes it even more impressive than their players or their quarterback play is the level of execution coupled with the pace of play. You know, everybody always talks about tempo and hurry up and going fast. Well, to be honest with you, there's 130 teams in college football. Every one of them can go fast if they want to. The question is, can you go fast and execute at an optimal level, execute and get first downs so you don't throw your defense back on the field all the time? That's what's separating Ole Miss right now from a lot of, if not every offense in college football. They execute at such a high level considering how fast they are going. And, you know, you and I have talked ad nauseum about this going back to, last winter, that when you have a quarterback playing to the level that Matt Corral is playing and you're kind of clicking on all cylinders, you know, let's call it what it is, because everybody's going to be pointing to the Alabama matchup with Ole Miss. You know, until that game comes, the question then is, okay, does Ole Miss have the maturity to play to their own standard and get to that game and be unscathed? All right. But what I've said the last few weeks about Alabama is, everybody wants to do analysis on Alabama. In my opinion, the only analysis that needs to be done on Alabama is, can you score 40 points on them? That's it. Are you capable of scoring 40? You're going to have to score at least 40 to beat Alabama, period. Is there any team in college football right now outside of Ole Miss that you would feel confident in saying could do that?
No. Ole Miss was the only one that –
the only one.
Yeah. Let's talk about Lane. Okay, so the maturation process for him, we got to see all of it. And, he went to rehab at Alabama, so to speak, under Saban, and then that was a messy divorce, getting fired a week before the national championship game. Tell me what happened. You visited with him. You've called their games. You've known him forever with West Coast ties. What did he take from kind of what he built up under Southern Cal and was able to see early in his career, and then what he wanted to do at Alabama, and then hiring Kendall Briles at FAU and continuing to tinker and come up with this offense, Tom?
Yeah, I think initially it was too much too soon for him. Okay, you're coming up under Norm Chow, Pete Carroll, and all of a sudden that label turns you into maybe something you're not quite just yet. All right. So now you get the Raiders job. You're 34 years old, or even that, was it 31 maybe, whatever it was. And, then you end up getting the Tennessee job. I contend to this day, if he doesn't leave Tennessee to go to USC, I don't think Tennessee is in the position they are now. I think that thing would have gotten rolling. He would have gotten it rolling. But because it did happen the way it happened, he may have never been introduced to some of the concepts of a Jeff Levy and a guy like Kendall Briles,
right,
which has enhanced the overall makeup of the offense. What he's done is he has morphed and adapted to players and to inviting different schematic elements into the offense. It's never been about, well, this is my scheme and we have to fit into this scheme and this is what we're doing. It's how do we make our scheme better? How do we evolve it? How do we revolve it around our players? And then, people use that phrase, rehab, going to Saban rehab school. And, the one thing that I think that did more for Lane Kiffin than anything else is at that institution, there is one voice coming out of that program, and it's Nick Saban, all right? The offensive coordinators do not get interviewed. They do not go on Twitter. They do not go on social media. They are there to do two things, recruit and coach football. And I think that gave him an opportunity to reflect on his own self-discipline outside of the sport of football when he's not in the building, right? And he probably created more discipline and more knowledge of how to conduct himself because he wasn't allowed to have a voice. He wasn't going to be the spokesperson for the not only the football team, not even the offense. And that probably has helped him. And he's grown and he's matured as a result of it. And he took on a job at FAU that was not a very good job, got him winning quickly, and he's earned the right to have the job that he has right now. And, everybody grows and you have lessons and you make mistakes. But I think that the learning how to be in the social atmosphere and not shoot yourself in the foot is the single greatest improvement he's made in his career.
Tom Luginbill, National College Football Analyst, ESPN, on the Modelo guest line. What did you make of Bama and Florida? That it looked like it was getting away from Florida, and then it was a very, very competitive game in the second half. I know they're not there offensively, but were you surprised that Florida was able to get their act together and take that game into the fourth quarter, Tom?
Yeah, I thought it was really impressive that Florida didn't fold their chair and just go home. In fact, they absolutely owned Alabama in the entirety of the third quarter, owned them. And again, a wonderful coaching job by Dan Mullen from an offensive perspective. All of the backfield action and the movement and the misdirection, and then you don't know if the quarterback's got the ball or not. And they had Alabama on their heels. And I know they're not where they want to be in the passing game, but they made strides in the passing game on Saturday. And what I was really impressed with Florida is there were times, and many times throughout the course of that game, they were the dominant factor in the trenches on both sides of the ball. And that was impressive. That's a great opportunity for not only Florida to grow and realize that, hey, they can compete with anybody, but you got to figure if you're Nick Saban, winning that game the way they had to win it is the best thing that ever happened to Nick Saban and that coaching staff, because now they have some great coachable moments. They can sit down with their team and critique and coach areas where they weren't very good, where they made mental errors. Because I think at times, you fall victim to being so much better than everybody else and winning decidedly, all right? Now, sometimes when you're going and you're critiquing the tape, you don't have all that much stuff you're critiquing, right? Well, now they do. They are chock full of items there that is ammunition for Nick Saban and his staff, which I think makes it scary for the rest of the conference because, as we've seen from Alabama in the past, if they've lost a game or they've come close to losing a game, they always go on a run. It's almost like it just kind of presses the reset button, you light the fuse, and off you go. So the way Alabama won that, if you're Nick Saban, was probably the thing that needed to happen to his football team.
Yeah. For our listeners, Florida almost averaged 6 yards a carry on Alabama.
Yeah.
That's something to just kind of think about, as you know what Ole Miss can do on the ground. You know what they can do through the air. But as Luke said, they'll have some valuable teaching moments this week, clean up some stuff against Southern Miss, and get ready for the big showdown. Tom, let's talk about you've been in the business for a long time. What are we going to do about this targeting rule? Or the rules of targeting?
Well, yeah, we are in the 2-year period that comes up. Every 2 years they'll go back and they'll sit and they'll revisit, the rules. Things need to be tweaked or outright changed. And I got to be honest with you, Bo, coming off of this past weekend, we've got to examine and I think get rid of the ejection portion of targeting. And here's why. We have to credit the coaches and the coaching staffs and how they have adjusted and changed how they coach tackling, how they coach hitting, how they coach approaching a ball carrier or a defenseless player. They've changed their habits. They've done everything that you've asked them to do. And we're not out there right now seeing kids maliciously go after people with the intent of harming them. We're not seeing that. And you know what? When we do see it, throw them out of the game, okay? But that's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing are bang-bang plays, momentum plays. We're seeing awkward body positioning, and it leads into it. And you're seeing a guy really lead with his shoulder and his head to the side, but the helmet still hits the face mask of the other guy. To me, we're adding a death penalty onto the life sentence. And if we were just talking about this and it was a bunch of headhunting all the time, that's different. And I think that's why this rule was enacted in the first place, was to eliminate that. The coaches are coaching it correctly. The players are doing the best that they can. But when you do that, I was in a game this past weekend. I'm convinced that the targeting call that happened to Indiana and their best defensive player, Micah McFadden, changed that entire game. If that call doesn't happen, I think Indiana wins the game. They have all the momentum. They're rolling along. They're at home. They've got the crowd behind them. That thing happened, and it was debatable to me. But again, no malicious intent. And I'm not so sure we don't need to go to a targeting 1, targeting 2 scenario where, if a guy just downright spears somebody, or you can tell he's going in to potentially harm somebody, fine. Call the penalty, throw him out. But I do think we need to have targeting 2. Because if you have targeting 2 and, you're looking at it, you're saying, okay, this happened during the course of a normal play. Let's give him the penalty, but we're not going to remove a good player from the game if he's not trying to actively hurt somebody. And I think it's got to change. Enough's enough. And there's so much gray area in it anyway that if we know there's not malicious intent, we need to stop acting like that's what everybody's doing when there is targeting, because it's not what everybody's doing.
Yeah. I agree with you on getting rid of the ejection portion of targeting probably 95+% of the time. I mean, these kids, no, they don't deserve to lose out on 2 quarters, 3 quarters, 3.5 quarters of football. They already have to practice year-round. You only get to play 12, 13 games. Good grief. Like you said.
Look at the Auburn player in the Penn State game. I mean, come on.
Yes.
Jeez,
Tom Luginbill on the Modelo guest line. Let's stay on officials, Lugs. I don't know. You may have been on a plane by the time this started playing out, but Mississippi State at Memphis. There was. Did you see some of this on the punt?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Okay.
And I've also seen the statement from the league, which I find amusing because in their entire statement, all right, there's no apology in there.
No, there's not.
None. There's no apology.
And I don't. We could get into the fact that Mississippi State didn't play well and shouldn't have been in that position. But as far as that play, Tom, you had 2 number 4s on the field, and you had an official blowing the play dead who was within, I don't know, by the time he walked 5 yards of the football. and then they let the play continue on, and then Memphis runs it back, and it's a touchdown. One, how egregious was that, and what was your takeaway on it?
Well, it's severely egregious because and there are rare instances where a call like that could determine the outcome of a game, and in this particular contest, it likely did. But there were multiple mechanical problems that would have put a stop to this. This wasn't just a one call; it was a few calls on the same call that could have prevented this from happening. And I think that officials sometimes need to realize that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be accountable. It's okay to, after the game, come out and say, "Hey, we screwed it up." And I say that, and I go back to the XFL in the spring of 2020. We got through 5 weeks, obviously, before the pandemic shut everything down. But if you recall the access that the viewer had to the mechanics of officiating, you had all the officials mic'd. You could hear what they were discussing on the field. Then all of a sudden you went up to the booth, and we had a camera and a microphone in there, and you could literally, in real time, digest what these officials are going through. And you know what? It ended up creating sympathy. It created an understanding more so on behalf of the fan, because they realized, wow, this isn't as black and white as we think it is a lot.
Yeah.
Or I didn't realize that had to be discussed when determining A, B, or C. And I think sometimes officiating crews go the wrong direction. They're so overprotected, and they don't want to be accountable, and they don't want to have to be responsible. But if they would open themselves up so the fans can see that it's not always what you think it is, and it is hard, you'd have more understanding, or just the simple accountability post-game. You can come out with a statement like the SEC head of officials in the conference did. That's fine, but maybe just add in there, hey, our lack of execution in this area may have cost one of our member institutions, a win. Put something in there, but they won't do it.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes it's healthier just to provide that access, open yourself up to it. You know what? At the end of a game, coaches, players, they all got to stand at the podium and answer the toll, right?
18-year-olds.
Officials don't.
That's right.
Yeah, they're 18-year-olds. And so what's wrong with getting up there and say, okay, let me explain how this works. And this one we didn't get it right, but a lot of people may not realize that you got to go through this point to this point to this point. I think it would be healthy for them.
Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds Show. Tom, we got 2 minutes. I want to go over LSU at MSU this weekend. 11 a.m. kick. Vegas seems to think it's going to be close, even though LSU has a talent advantage, although they haven't looked real good either. What do you see in this game?
I'm concerned about what looked like it was going to be a very, very strong group in the offensive line for LSU that all of a sudden isn't very good. And that's concerning to me. And Max Johnson played really, really well last week in Central Michigan. I think they're kind of starting to come into their own a little bit as an offense. But Mississippi State, I think, has got to own the line of scrimmage in this one. And the environment's going to be fantastic. It's going to be a difficult place for LSU to play. But I want to see how does Mississippi State match up with LSU's offensive line? And then, of course, just as we talk about each and every week, can you generate some run game success to match the passing game if you're Mississippi State, so that people don't just line up, rush 3 and drop 8 and dare you to run it?
Are you calling that game this weekend?
No, I actually have Texas Tech in Austin on ABC.
Okay, nice. All right.
Yeah.
I just saw that was an ESPN game, so I wasn't sure what. But
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. ABC, got it. All right. Well, appreciate it. Would you have if you were making a poll out today, top 10?
Yeah.
Because I don't really care about anything outside of that right now. But top 5, top 10. Would Ole Miss be in your top 5 or top 10?
It'd probably be between 5 and 6 for me right now. I would not have Iowa in the top 5 because of their offense. I'd probably have Penn State around 5 to 7, kind of in the same area that Ole Miss is. I think it's a fair question. Anybody who would say, hey, should they be in there? I think the initial knee-jerk reaction is no. Why would you put them there? And then if you sit back and peel back the layers, you might have a change of heart.
We'll leave it there. Luginbill on the Out of Bounds Show. Thanks, Luke. Appreciate it, buddy.
All right. Take care, man.
Tom Luginbill calling Texas Tech and Texas in Austin. That's a great place to go for the weekend in Austin, Texas. He joined us on the Modelo guest line. The show is brought to you by Fleetway Market. Fuel up at Fleetway Market in Dogwood. Fuel up at Fleetway Market on Highway 51 in Madison. And fuel up at Fleetway Market in Gluckstadt. Fleetway Market, over 20 locations in Mississippi. Fuel up your road trips at Fleetway Market. And Blake's buying me lunch at the Market Cafe at Fleetway Market in Gluckstadt. I feel like you've been doing a good job today, that you have been matching the max effort Monday mentality that this show has been committed to for 18 years.
I learned what not to do from the Mississippi State coaching staff.
Oh, wow. Are you the next special teams coordinator at MSU?
Can't be worse.
Out of bounds. Surely you can get an in-house position. Out of Bounds, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app. Streaming live on the Zone, 105.9.com. You missed any of that interview, you can watch it on Facebook. Search the Out of Bounds show. YouTube, search Out of Bounds Sports. Steve Robertson will stop by at 9:15. So Steve Robertson in 15 minutes on the Out of Bounds show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN, WRKS. Would you have Ole Miss in your top 5 or top 10 after week 3? We're live in the Bank Plus studio.